Bill in Connecticut, I believe, and he was asking me, there were several of them, and I don't want to get this wrong. My memory is failing me right now. There's the Israeli company that's even in mainstream news that runs 90+% of all caller ID checks in the country.
There's two of those. That's Amdocs and Converse.
Start over. They didn't have your mic on. Go ahead.
Yeah, the two companies that handle basically all the telecommunications in the United States are Amdocs and Converse. And I want to think that the establishment the guy was talking about is Otago Securities. They're the ones that had the lease for another, I believe, 8.
No, Otago was the big instant message company that sold it and changed the name. And it was in the Jerusalem Post that, it's not a rumor, that they called their employees and said, get out of the building 4 hours before. And that was also in the AP. But again, the executives all talked about it publicly, showing they weren't involved. And I'm not saying there weren't elements of Israel involved somehow. The point is I'm saying Israel didn't go it alone. It doesn't reduce guilt on anybody. It's saying it's a huge operation, just like LBJ was involved in USS Liberty, so was Israel.
Absolutely.
It's like if two guys rob a bank, they're both equally guilty. The ADL-controlled white supremacist groups get mad at us and want to make it only an anti-Semitic deal so it doesn't become a mainstream media item and become kosher and acceptable to talk about. No, but what's the one that had the majority of contracts over airport security? Now, I know that Marvin Bush's company and Jeb Bush had companies over the major airports the hijackers came from, and the food service onto the planes, and the security on the towers.
And that was Securicom that later turned into Stratasec. That's the Jeb Bush one. The only other company I can think of was Zim Shipping that also seemed to have foreknowledge. The securities companies, I'm not sure. I know that through Amdocs and Converse, this rogue network, because they picked up about 180 Israelis, had basically infiltrated every major intelligence operation we had, from secret offices, the Secret Service, the CIA, the FBI. The list went on in that Fox report.
And again, your film, Fabled Enemies, has the Fox News clips, the C-SPAN, the congressional admissions. This is not our opinion.
No, it's absolutely not our opinion. It's one piece of an international intelligence operation that continues to this day. If you look at Iran-Contra, for example.
You've got Israel, you've got the Brits, you've got the U.S.,
exactly.
You've got Latin American countries, and you've got the Iranians.
And Israel was used for plausible deniability. Israel would actually purchase the weapons, so the United States didn't have to do that part. We would take those weapons, ship them down, and then pay Israel later.
Just like what happened in the 9-year war with the Russians, the Israelis, the Turks, the British, the U.S., the Saudi Arabians, all involved.
Absolutely.
That's how governments compartmentalize, where not one intelligence agency that I've seen never runs it all themselves, because they want to divide it up where only certain groups know certain things.
Look at the Pakistani ISI. This was literally set up by British intelligence and then revamped by U.S. intelligence and covert operations in the late 70s and 80s. And then they're the ones funding the hijackers prior to 9/11.
All right, good job. Thank you so much. Again, Bill, does that answer your question?
Yeah, no, I just thought it was interesting because, like I said, this article that's here on MSNBC today talking about, Israel launches biometric airline security system. It's like, they turn around, they take your passport, your fingerprint, and like with the other guy, there was another guy that called in earlier sitting there saying something about the whole biometric thing. But I mean, it's like, if people turn around and get ticked off at this whole, body scan thing, which personally I will never fly. I mean, that's it. I just sat there and said, you know what, if that's the way it's going to be, because it's already humiliating enough that you got to go in there. You're not even a bad guy, and they're frisking you, checking you out, this, that, the other thing. And it's like, forget about it. Why fly? But now it's like they sit there and say that they don't want to have this, and they'll say, oh, well, let's go to this company. And then next thing you know, this company's got the contract.
And then you've got Chertoff, who's an admitted Israeli double agent. His father and mother were founders of the Mossad, and he's making all this money. We're really being taken advantage of, and it's wrong. I appreciate your call. Israel tests new technology that could reduce airport security checks and make flights safer. And so what Israel's saying is they haven't had an incident in over a decade. In 2002, a guy forgot to check a gun. Somebody was allowed to fly, but he forgot to check it. And then he later reported himself. They never have any instances because they do profile. And they do have some real Arab terrorists over there that do want to get on planes. I mean, some of that is real. And Israel hasn't had an incident in over a decade, other than the 2002 gun incident where it was an accident. I mean, Jimmy Jones of the Cowboys twice brought guns on planes accidentally, forgetting. I mean, anybody who's got a brain has a gun in their briefcase. And I've forgotten before and been at the airport, noticed a pocket knife and just trashed it. Little bitty pocket knife, little bitty Pioneer, old timer. I got a couple of them. But the point is that all of that goes on. And so now Israel's saying, hey, we're going to have biometric scanning, and we're going to have biometric thumbprinting, and we're going to have ID cards. And so the two are merging even worse to make something completely nightmarish. I have the AP right here reporting it. Okay, let's go ahead and talk to Mike in California. Mike, you're on the air.
Hey, Alex. I had a couple of questions. Could you elaborate on what you know of some of the odd underground weapons you know that the elite may be working on, stuff like Project Bluebeam and other stuff that you probably know of, but I guess really talk about? And the other question is, how much will race play in how the elite envision the world they want to make or create in the future?
Race plays a central role in divide and conquer, playing different groups off against each other, with the government playing the part of the referee and judge that keeps everyone in line, while their private foundations play everyone off against each other. Hitler disagreed with George Bernard Shaw, who they both admired each other. Bernard Shaw said, do IQ test and kill everyone with under a 90 IQ. And then over time, phase it up to 100 and make a super race, kill everyone who isn't a good socialist, break up the family. Hitler said, I agree with that, but we're only going to kill the sub-races. And then later, we're going to start culling to only the ultra-superior Aryan. And they made a deal with the Emperor of Japan, who was obsessed with eugenics. That's mainline history. He said the Japanese will rule Asia as the master race, and the Germans with the British. The Germans actually believe the British, if you really read Hitler and Goebbels' writings, were the ultra-supreme, undefiled Aryan, because there had been so many Eastern European and Arab. I mean, the Arabs even went into Western Europe. And so they believed that even the Germans were not as ultra-pure as a certain strain of Britty. That's where the term British comes from, as a tribe known as the Britties. And it's all complete hogwash. It's again, you can't even single out the Britties as a distinct tribe. All those Germanic tribes were always killing and ranging and running around. But England is as Germanic as you can get. I mean, in the genetic studies that have been done, because they all came from the Gauls in France and from Germania and from the Vikings in Northern Europe. They all came and waged war in England for thousands of years. Thousands of years before the Romans showed up. It was just continual slaughter going on as the Germanic tribes killed each other. And so out of all this lore, that's why Hitler cried when he had to bomb London, they said. And the British flew over and bombed Berlin. Hitler wouldn't bomb population centers because the British Aryans were too precious. But then Churchill said, we've got to get British resolve behind this. And so they sent a bunch of liberators, a squadron of liberators, to bomb civilian centers. This is mainline history. I've seen this on History Channel. To bomb Berlin. And so Hitler started the Blitz. And he cried, oh, his precious Aryans were dying. His precious, the Brits. Oh, it's horrible. I mean, this is how sick these people are, ladies and gentlemen. And whenever he flooded the bunkers and the subways so the Russians couldn't use it, so he'd have a few more hours in his bunker, he said, well, I guess our Aryans weren't as good as their Aryans, and now I'm just worried the Russian Mongols will take over. Oh, this is horrible. Let me take cyanide. I mean, when you really know the history, folks, and not some skewed history, I have read, no exaggeration, over 100 thick history books, secret wartime reports, Nazi books. It's well more than, I've probably read 30 or 40 books by Joseph Goebbels, by Adolf Hitler, okay? These are books published by them. This is not propaganda. Hitler was a communist. Joseph Goebbels was a communist. They wanted communism, but it wasn't popular. And when British intelligence was funding them, they wanted their own brand of communism to block Russian communism. And then they became from National Socialist to fascist and then became anti-communist. And that's all on record. Stalin admired Hitler. Hitler admired Stalin. They made a deal to divide Poland up. I mean, when you really know history. And so George